Hey everypony! Brad the Browncoat Brony here with the next part of Kiss of the Dark. Quick thing before I jump right in on this. Um, I reworked what I'm going to be doing for how the videos what chapters I'm going to do for what videos, and it turns out that there will be 6 videos instead of 7 because I found out that I worked it wrong the first time or something, but anyhow. But yeah, as it turns out, it'll only end up taking 6 videos instead of 7, so we're already halfway there. But yeah, so we have 4 chapters to cover today, and I'm just gonna jump right in on this. Intermission. When First Strike and Vanguard stopped the cart in order for Forest Mist to show Twilight something, the dusk was approaching. Now it was early in the evening, and the couple still hadn't shown up. It felt like Twilight and Forest were taking forever, and the guards eventually took the reins from off their backsides. They were getting sore from having to carry the burden of the vehicle everywhere today. Yet they found themselves watching the same spot of the forest that Twilight went into, with her little colt friend.
Colt friend? Are you serious?
Interrupted Vanguard.
What else could it be?
First Strike said.
You saw how they were like. When has Celestia ever asked us for a ride through a forest with a stallion by her side? Never! And I could see them a ways off when they were inside the park. He was nuzzling Twilight. Some pony dares nuzzle the princess?
Vanguard stomped his hoof for dramatic effect.
The nerve! But she didn't stop him. In fact, she enjoyed it. Enjoyed it? How is this possible? I told you, he's her cult friend. They're probably kissing in there. I swear, I will see to it Her Majesty repossesses your secret stash of romance novels.
First Strike had a comeback ready for him when they heard the crunching sound of leaves again. That meant some pony was coming. They pretended nothing had happened and stood tall for the princess. But it was only her that showed up. Forest Mist was nowhere to be seen, and the alicorn hung her head low, depressed and exhausted. The guards ran to her aid, making sure nothing bad had happened, but there wasn't any sign of damage on her frame. First Strike and Vanguard looked at each other, and they had no idea what occurred in there.
What happened? Where's Forest Mist?
Vanguard inquired.
Oh, him,
Twilight mumbled, surprised to hear that name again.
He had to leave on short notice. He's not coming back with me.
That's good. I was afraid something had happened to you in there,
said First Strike.
You were gone for a while.
Do you think you can take me home now? It's been a long day, and I really want to go to bed now.
Yes, Your Majesty,
they said in unison. Twilight climbed into the carriage again, and the guards brought her on the way home. It would take some time to get there, and she had time to spend alone with her thoughts. To say that she was conflicted about the day's events was an understatement. She felt weary, and her eyes tried to close tightly, but she couldn't fall asleep here. Her hooves ached from all the walking, even though she felt perfectly fine up until Sombra brought her to the stream. Did she do the right thing by letting him leave without a fight? Yes, she would make sure he really was reformed like she had done with Discord, but there was no telling what Sombra would do now. He was much different than the last time they met, but that wasn't enough to quench all her doubts. However, she couldn't deny that she really liked being around him whenever he was Forest Mist. How could she pretend that she didn't like it when he nuzzled her? And how she leaned on his shoulder, since she felt that comfortable around him. Yet it was King Sombra of all ponies. He was king. The trees gave way for the hills of Sweet Apple Acres. Her home wasn't far away from there anymore, maybe a few minutes tops. She forced herself to ask a question in her mind. She acknowledged by now that she couldn't decide whether or not to keep trusting Sombra, or sending that certain letter to Celestia regardless of what she promised him. So, why was she so conflicted about this?
Because I might have been in love with him when he was Forest Mist. Or I wanted to be in love with him. Wait, is this clouding my judgment?
She managed to feel worse about the situation than before. There was no way she could allow him to do this to her. She was a princess now, and princesses don't allow things like courting to distract them on this level. And yet it did. After a few minutes of debating and internal conflicts, the carriage stopped, and they had arrived at the treehouse. She piled out and released the guards for the day. They left the sandals and crown with her, and took the carriage with them. By then, the rooms in the house were all lit. She could hear Spike in there, sweeping around the floors. The door was locked, and so she knocked a few times to let him know she was back. He unlocked the door, and was thrilled to see Twilight there. "You're here! And a full 10 minutes back before you said you would be! So how did it go at the Empire?"
Well, it's a long story.
She intentionally left out the bit about Forrest being Sombra. She wasn't sure how to handle it just yet. The part about giving him a slim chance to redeem himself was still subject to change. But other than that, it was note for note the same story. You went out with Forrest Mist?" Spike asked, confused as hay.
Yes, it wasn't planned at all. But you know how he was in the Empire. We had plenty of time to spend together before I had to come back.
Spike gulped. He wasn't sure how well this next part would go. "Can I say something, and you'll promise not to hurt me?"
Why would I do that?
It's... I never thought you would have a cult friend! There! I said it! Now please don't kill me! Twilight sighed and shook her head.
I know why. I'm such a dork and too obsessed with books. And you thought out loud that I would never have friends. Isn't that right?
Her voice lowered the more she talked, until the last 3 words were just whispers. She sat down and looked to the floor. Spike saw this as his fault, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything."
It's not you, it's me. I just have a lot to think about, and I really want to go to bed.
"I understand. I should probably get some sleep too." Eventually, she wound up in bed, tossing and turning around in her sheets. She still kept thinking about Sombra, her every thought revolving around him. Everything he did for her while he took the form of Forest Mist. How intelligent he was. How he reassured her that there was nothing wrong about his character anymore. And how she wanted to throw him in prison, or let Celestia handle it herself. The Princess of the Sun would love nothing more than to make up for losing the Crystal Empire to him so long ago. Then she realized why she was fighting herself over all of this, and she cried herself to sleep for 2 reasons. A part of her was in love with Sombra, and it was fighting furiously with the part that didn't. The halls to Sombra's castle had only gotten better and better with time. He managed to put more crystals inside the walls, make the outlining stone stronger, and fill the shelves of his library with more books. The whole atmosphere changed when he returned. He still didn't bother putting on his armor and cape just yet, not even with his crown. The sound of his bare hooves touching stone echoed around the hallways as he went the way to his bedroom. He couldn't have been more pleased with himself. Everything about the day, the day that needed to be perfect, was flawlessly executed. The pieces were set where they needed to go, and he was in the right position to make his next move. The guards he passed gave him puzzled looks, given that he wasn't wearing anything save for a black scarf. They still saluted him as he went through the halls. He hadn't come up with a name for them yet, and he would need one if he was going to keep going with his plans. What about the Shadow Guard? Sounded great to him, and it matched his themes. Eventually he found himself in his bedroom. No pony was there to see him, and he instantly lounged around on top of the blankets. How relieving it was to finally rest after a whole day of watching Twilight eat his words. It was getting tougher, but that only made his triumph sweeter. He parted his hooves through his mane, pulling the hair down around his face. Then he slipped through the blankets and rested his head on the pillow. His thoughts were entirely on Twilight that evening, though in a different manner than they had been the previous nights. He wasn't thinking about his next moves as much as he thought about Twilight as a pony. There was no lying in his words when he said that she was a remarkable mare. She truly was, and he couldn't wait to spend more time with her. He just had to wait until a certain meeting was over. He fell asleep in his bed. A smile draped across his face. Captured by the Dark. To say that the first 2 days of the succeeding week were difficult on Twilight was an understatement. Sunday was a rare day off, and she spent all her time wrestling with her feelings towards Sombra. Somehow, she wore herself out faster than she did whenever she was working. That defeated the entire purpose of having a day off. Then came Monday. It was both more and less taxing than Sunday. She didn't debate her options as fiercely, but the stress of the emotional turmoil was replaced with going back to work on her royal duties. And she was no closer to an answer to a question that would never leave her head until she took care of it. But Tuesday arrived, the date where she would travel to Canterlot with Mayor Mare to meet with Celestia. lay out the future of Ponyville with her former teacher and fellow Ponyvillian official. Around 7 in the morning, the guards arrived to the entrance to Town Hall along with Princess Twilight. She had her crown and golden sandals on, making sure she was presentable for the meeting. Vanguard knocked on the door first.
Hello? Who is it?
A familiar voice said from within the hall.
This is the Royal Guard of Celestia's army. It is time for the meeting with Princesses Twilight Sparkle and Celestia and Canterlot. Are you ready to depart?
Vanguard stated. The door swung wide open, and Mayor Mare was already dressed for success. Her tie rested perfectly on her neck, and her mane was neatly and orderly.
Of course. This is a very important meeting after all.
She addressed Vanguard.
Hello again, Princess Twilight. Celestia sent a letter last weekend to me. She said she wanted the meeting to take place right before lunch. There's no harm in showing up ahead of schedule.
No, of course not, said Twilight. I guess everything's set.
And so they took off into the chariot, Mayor Mare and Twilight Sparkle having to share the space. The guards went for the walls of Canterlot, where Celestia would be waiting for them. Having the mayor of Ponyville sitting with Twilight, with her business-first approach and high position, created a feeling that this was building up to something big. Yet Twilight found herself staring outside of the chariot's bounds, looking out to the miles of empty plains. She wasn't thinking about the meeting at all, and she came close to nodding off for a nap.
Princess Twilight, is there a problem?
The mayor asked. What? Twilight said, snapping back to reality.
Is what the problem?
I've been talking about some of the concepts we should propose to Her Highness, and you haven't been paying attention ever since I started.
I haven't been listening? I didn't notice.
Is something bothering you? You look like something's on your mind.
You're right. Something is on my mind. But it's really personal, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it right now. Sorry if I sounded rude, but I've been thinking about it for 3 days and I still don't know what I want to do.
I see. Is it going to be a problem for the meeting? We could always delay the meeting for a few hours. I'm sure she'll understand when it comes to you.
No, we're not delaying anything. The meeting will be held as scheduled. I won't let this get in the way.
Eventually, the chariot arrived within the gated walls of Canterlot. Waves of nostalgia hit the princess, as they always did when she took a trip to her hometown. Seeing all the guards that served under her brother was a nice treat, and she could spot her parents' house from the bird's-eye view. She could spot Princess Celestia from a watchtower, looking over the skies from her telescope. She spotted her former teacher incoming, and she smiled to see her again. The Princess of the Sun mentioned to a guard, and then spread her wings out. She flew down from the high tower, and landed on the courtyard steps to await the arriving pony. Twilight grinned, and couldn't wait to see Celestia again.
Remember, we're here on royal business,
the mayor mentioned.
But it will be unusual to be doing business with her, won't it?
Now that you mention it,
Twilight replied.
Still, I've seen her in the middle of business meetings before. This won't be new to me.
The chariot touched down inside the courtyard, and one of Celestia's personal guards opened the door for Princess Twilight. Mayor Mare followed her out of the vehicle, and the chariot was taken away to a resting place. As soon as they touched down on solid ground, Twilight ran to Celestia and gave her one big hug. Celestia returned the favor, and it felt like old times again.
It's always good to see you again, Celestia said. How have you been adjusting to your new duties? Wonderful, Twilight responded. It's not overwhelming at all, and I like the job. It's only going to get better, right? Indeed.
Celestia then turned to the other guest.
Welcome to Canterlot, Mayor Mare of Ponyville. I trust that your ride was smooth. First Strike and Vanguard are among some of my top Pegasi.
Yes, Your Majesty,
said the mayor, bowing before the Princess of the Sun.
Thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I never would have thought you would ask me for advice on this.
I always would have. I need to consider the voice of the ponies living there, no matter what. Now follow me inside. I have everything arranged for the meeting today. How long will it be? Twilight asked. That depends entirely on us, but I budgeted enough time that we will have up to 3 days to debate this. You can stay inside any bedroom that's not taken in the meantime.
And so they went inside the castle, Mayor Mare going out of her way to make sure she was behind the 2 alicorns, the ones ahead of her on the totem pole. Inside the vast hallways, a red carpet graced the floors and gave their hooves a nice cushion to step on. The large windows allowed for equally large amounts of sunlight to come inside, making unnatural light all the more necessary. The symbol of Celestia's sun was repeated everywhere, on the banners and crests on the doors. It was a firm reminder that this was her castle. Though in recent years, it was juxtaposed with Luna's moon in a few places here and there. Occasionally, they would see one hallway done in blue and white stars painted on the ceiling. Another reminder for all guests to consider, declaring that Luna was back on her spot of the ruling class. Eventually, they came to a turn that led to one doorless room, but before they went inside, Celestia stopped and faced the princess and the mayor of Ponyville directly.
Before we take our places inside, I want to say how fortunate it is that we can hold this meeting openly. I want to make sure that your every word can be heard and considered, and that your opinions will be valued. But we must be certain we're making the right decisions, too. This is unprecedented in every way.
Without further ado, they were taken inside the next room. It was made obvious that this was supposed to be a private meeting room. All that was in there was a small round table for 4 ponies, no more than that. Pictures and maps of Equestria outlined the simply designed walls. In fact, it was more functional than pleasing to the eye, but that was intentional, given what the room was used for. Next to the 3 taken seats were tall glasses of water and sheets of paper with pens. Those pens would be used a lot over the next few days. Along with those were a few pitchers to refill the glasses of water.
Please, take your seats and get comfortable,
Celestia said. Twilight and Mayor Mare did so, and they took their seats opposite Celestia, and rested their flanks on the cushions. The mayor took a large gulp of water almost immediately. Apparently she was nervous about the meeting as well. Celestia took her place with the mayor's, and refilled the mayor's glass to the top.
As I understand it, you have called this meeting to discuss how to expand Princess Twilight's house and offices without changing Ponyville in the meantime,
she said, taking a look at her notes.
Yes, that's correct,
informed the mayor.
We both like Ponyville the way it is, but that house inside the tree won't be enough. Isn't that right, Princess Twilight?
But Twilight found herself lost in her thoughts again. Her attention was drawn to her limbs, and all those times Sombra put his hooves in hers.
Princess Twilight, are you troubled again?
What? Oh,
she cringed, realizing that she let the issue get in the way again.
I did it again, didn't I? Did what?
Celestia questioned.
There's something personal that's bothering her,
the mayor informed.
I don't know what it is, but she doesn't want to talk about it with me.
Twilight, if there is something that's distracting you, we could stop to talk about it in private,
Celestia offered.
No!
Twilight snapped, seemingly out of nowhere.
Wait, I...
She kept shivering through her words, the air around her heating up.
No, I think we should continue. I know you want to keep to business, and I respect that, but it's obviously getting to you. We can resume at a later time. No, maybe tomorrow, she finally conceded. We should at least get started on the important matter at Hoof. Then I think I'll be more comfortable talking about it.
Celestia sighed. It was never a good thing whenever Twilight felt the need to hide something from her mother figure.
As you wish. Now then, on the matter of Twilight's new house.
Around 3 days' worth of planning and effort happened over the course of the next 10 hours. There was much discussing, planning out buildings, and Celestia knows how many sketches drawn. Turned out that Mayor Mare was an established sketch artist, given that she had a brief stint in the architecture business before she had a political career. In that time, there were some aspects agreed upon with Ponyville's future. Twilight's house would eventually be replaced by a small castle, barely 2 towers in scope, and it would host all the things she would need for her current demands. It would do for the next 10 years until she had more concrete plans for the rest of her rule. In the meantime, they agreed not to increase the amount of royal guards by a large amount. 12 guards tops. Ponyville was not that big of a city, and didn't need the security of Canterlot yet. After a bunch of feasting and dining with Celestia and the mayor, Twilight needed a moment to herself. Allow her mind to think about nothing but Sombra. She had to, now that she would admit to Celestia that she had a cult friend at the very least tomorrow. But it was impossible to find a quiet spot at first. She thought the library would be the right location. Then she found a group of nobles in an open book reading club. They had chosen the last Dare and Do book, so it turned out to be the loudest book reading club she had ever seen. The ballroom sounded appealing too. Who would be going there at a time like this? Apparently a group of graduating royal cadets, partying their flanks off. But then she found the right place by accident. She pushed a pair of doors open, any doors that might lead to a quiet place. There, the moon was resting above her head. Its light reflected off the flowing waters that would feed the plants and flowers. Only 4 royal guards were there, and they all stood tall and didn't make any noise. The castle walls still surrounded it, but it felt strangely disconnected from the rest of the place. She found herself in the middle of Celestia's gardens, and no pony was there to take over her attention span. That was just what she needed. She made a few steps into the grassy fields, and took a deep breath of relief. There were a few critters chirping around there, but that was it in terms of noise. The scent of flowers filled her nostrils, and it was very pleasing to smell. Guards watched her very carefully, noting the crown meant she was that princess. So, what did she want to think about, now that she was sitting down next to a bushel of flowers? Where should she begin? She had a good chance to talk to Celestia and reveal as much as she wanted to concerning her relationship with Sombra. Or hide as much, and sadly she found herself wanting to hide it. Why was that so? She was afraid that Sombra would die quickly under Celestia's power, and a part of her was convinced that he really did change. But this wasn't just something you could just hide for very long. Maybe she should tell Tia about him, say everything he told her, in order to convince her that he was worth giving a second chance.
Oh, I just wish this was decided for me. I hate these kinds of dilemmas. It's just like that time Celestia gave me 2 tickets to the gala and every pony wanted that second ticket.
She lowered her head to the ground and allowed the trickling water to wash over her ears. How it reminded her of the stream, the river that was beginning to mean so much to her. What she didn't know was that some pony else was watching her, not a guard, waiting to see what she would do, and very pleased to know that there were only 4 guards to deal with.
The moment has come at last,
the invisible force declared.
Everything about this scenario plays up to my need. And now, it is the time to strike.
The force made its move and flew down into the garden. Once it found its target, it entered within the confines of Twilight's horn. A strong sensation of dizziness came over her. She rubbed her temples with her front hooves, and she started to get a headache out of the blue.
Oh, what's going on?
She moaned. She assumed it was just exhaustion at first, but the pain got worse. It was like some pony drilling inside her head, and she cried out from the pain. It was almost unbearable, and she was forced to lie down from it. And then it started to happen. Her horn glowed with magic. Magic that she did not cast. The magical aura was black compared to her natural purple coloring. She moaned as the pain grew more intense. Her whole head was throbbing from whatever was causing this, and she wanted it to stop now. A guard came by, noticing that the princess was in pain. He walked over to her location and bent his hooves to get down on her level.
Your Highness, are you not feeling well?
He questioned.
No, I don't know what's going on, she whispered. I think it might be a magical surge.
That's what she would have guessed in that situation. She had these every now and again, though they weren't as severe as this one. Her horn would show an excess in magical energy, and she just had to spend it on something to get over it. But she knew something was up when she no longer felt the grass on her hooves. She was lifting off the ground again. It was a surge in black magic.
Oh, Celestia, not here!
Entire currents of dark magic enveloped her body, and she began to hover off the ground. Her eyes gave way from their natural whites to hideous greens, and the magic emitting from her horn grew in power.
Princess Twilight!
Exclaimed the guard.
What's going on?
Get away from me!
She shouted, her voice echoing with another voice not her own.
Run and get help! I don't know what's going on!
A sphere of dark energy emerged quickly to the surface, overpowering her will. It shot out of her horn and came to hit the guard straight in the chest. The guard flew backwards from the force of the blast. His chest plate was shattered everywhere, and it left a deep mark in his chest. He smashed into the walls of the castle with a disgusting snap. He fell down onto the bush, and there was no movement in his limbs. He stopped breathing altogether after she was finished with him. The other 3 guards turned in time to catch the victim meeting his end, and they went to see what could cause this. When they went to see how Twilight was holding up, she was crackling with dark electricity all around her. Something was wrong here, and they had to do something now.
You two, take her from behind,
the captain of the unit ordered.
I'll face her myself. She's out of control.
The Pegasi guards nodded and flew around behind the princess. The captain, a unicorn, moved around to face Twilight Sparkle. Yet Twilight could see what they were trying to do, and she cried out in fear, knowing that they were doing this to stop her.
Please! I don't want to do this to you! Get Celestia! She knows what to do!
Yet she faced the Pegasi first with an unnatural force, and beamed her horn towards them. Her horn was pure black through the perspiration, and she released an electricity spell in their direction. The spell shot lightning at her attackers, hitting them from all angles. They screamed from the sparks as they were electrocuted from head to hoof, and their fur stood up as their faces were contorted to screaming. When she was finished with them, they fell to the floor with no life in their bodies. They were taken care of.
You! What are you doing?
The captain shouted.
This is not like you!
The alicorn turned to face the guard. Her eyes were pure green, and the purple mist came out of them. The captain's eyes widened. realizing what was happening to her. Yet that was the last thing he saw before she took care of him as well. Her horn sent another dark sphere spell, and this time it hit the victim's head straight on. His helmet was gone almost immediately, and his body collided with the hard bark of the only tree in the garden. The force from the blast was so powerful that the trunk was smashed into splinters, and the tree crashed into the side of the castle. The captain landed down on the ground, gone beyond repair. Blood trailed down his nostrils and dripped onto the grass, staining it in red. The force was finished with her, releasing its host and letting go. Twilight slowly descended down to the ground, touching down to the floor. The magical surges had faded away. Her headaches were gone, and her eyes had returned to normal. She shook her head around, trying to get her bearings, and she looked around to see what had happened while she lost control, and she gasped in horror from the sight. The whole garden was destroyed, with splinters and uprooted plants everywhere. The tree was damaged beyond repair, and who knew how much debris was everywhere. Then she spotted the body of a guard. His body was ashy, and sparks of electricity shot out of his armor. His eyes were shut tight. If she didn't know any better, he was... No. It couldn't be. It couldn't be true. She ran to his side and bent down to see him up close and personal. Her hooves shook his head around, hoping to wake him up. But he didn't move. He collapsed when she let him go. She put a hoof on his neck to hear for a heartbeat, just to make sure. There was no heartbeat. He was dead.
No. It can't be,
she whispered. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she buried her face in the guard's neck.
I killed him.
Time slowly went around her. Nothing mattered anymore. She felt the weight of 1,000 planets around her neck, and she was choking from the pressure. She was a criminal. A murderer. Then she heard something that stopped her heart for a second.
What was that? I heard a noise in the gardens. It could be an intruder.
It was the voice of another captain, and he was in charge of a separate unit of guards, one that acted as a response team in these situations, and he was coming to see what happened down there. She heard the shuffling of hooves, running right in her direction. She looked down at the body, and realized that they would likely capture her if they found out. How could she defend herself? She knew without a doubt that she killed him, all because she allowed dark magic to overwhelm her senses. She stepped away from the body, realizing in horror that she would likely deserve death for her actions.
What can I do? They'll find me if I hide inside the castle, and I can't hide in Canterlot to save my life. They know every room of it. Oh, Celestia, please forgive me for this.
She did the only thing she could come up with. She spread her wings out, and flew right up into the sky. Her sandals and crown came off, unable to deal with the intense speed she was flying under. One of her feathers escaped her wing, slowly descending to the ground below. She flew away from Canterlot, wanting to go anywhere but there. She didn't know where she was going anymore, but she kept flying until the city was far away. Miles of plains and forests passed under her wings, and she kept flying under the eyes of Luna's moon, drifting for miles, nowhere to go, nowhere in civilization where she would be accepted. Once Celestia knew what she had done, she would never want to see her beloved student again. And Twilight thought she deserved it. Eventually, her wings gave out on her, and they felt heavy after so many miles of use. They forced her to find a landing spot. She found a lake nearby, and landed just outside of its banks. It was the first moment in a while where she could rest and think about everything, and when she did, she collapsed on all 4 limbs and cried her heart out. Her cheeks were drenched in tears, and she covered her face with her front hooves. She kept crying for entire minutes, unable to stop them from gushing out of her eyes.
My future is gone,
she honestly thought to herself.
How am I supposed to go back to Celestia now? I can't. This is the end of my studies, my rule, my time with my friends.
Her thoughts went to her 5 friends, the other elements of harmony. They would surely be devastated to hear what she had done in Canterlot, and would likely cast her out from their group after it sunk in. It was yet another reason to cry, and she had more than enough as it was. She kept lying down on the grass, never ceasing to cry. The minutes blended in with each other, and she lost all her bearings of time. It didn't matter anyways. The lake watched over her, reflecting the moonlight to give the place a feeling of sanctuary, but she wasn't the only one there. At first, she didn't know that there was another pony that had arrived. She was too lost in her own despair to know what was going on around her. She never picked up on the sound of hooves coming ever closer. Then the pony put a hoof on Twilight's shoulder. She brought her head out, scared it was a guard, or even worse, Celestia. But it wasn't. It was Sombra.
Twilight, what are you doing here?
He asked. Twilight didn't think about what she was doing. She hugged him tightly around the neck. She buried her face in his neck and kept crying. He wrapped a hoof around her shoulders and tried his best to comfort her.
There. I'm here for you.
It's horrible,
She cried.
I killed 4 guards in the garden, and they'll be looking for me soon. And I don't know what to do.
She felt him hugging her back, and she lost herself over to his embrace. She didn't know what else to do.
How did you kill them?
He inquired.
A magical surge of dark magic. I'm so sorry.
He pulled away and forced her to look at him back in the eye.
Twilight, have you not read the book by Star Swirl? Dark magic has a will of its own. It can do things you never intended for it to do.
That caused Twilight to cry even harder.
So it means that I wasn't strong enough to stop it?
Yes. I hate that it came to this, but it's not your fault. You tried to master something that you had no control over, but it's like that with any pony that tries to learn it. Perhaps that's why the book was lost with time, because you're not the first pony to kill some pony by accident like this.
But it doesn't change that I killed 4 ponies, and nothing is going to bring them back.
He held her close again, running a hoof along her neck.
It's okay. I'm here for you.
She clung to him at the same time, just wanting to be held and not hated for her actions. The pain and agony from the murders would never go away, but this was helping. They spent some time holding each other, until the middle of the night arrived. Time was drifting along, but she didn't want to acknowledge it. And that was the moment she finally pushed aside her fears and questioning, and allowed herself to trust Sombra entirely with her heart. He pulled away from her, and noticed that the tears were gone. Her cheeks were dry too.
I can take you away from here,
He mentioned.
What do you mean?
I built myself a castle, a place to live while I was in exile. It looks like you need a place to stay.
But they'll find me eventually. I just know it.
This castle is far away from where they are. It's in the middle of the mountains, and they'll never come to think about looking for you in there. But you have to tell me if this is what you want.
I have no other choice.
She said, her words slurred together as she began to cry again.
Take me with you.
As you wish, Twilight Sparkle.
He took on his shadow form again, turning himself into a cloud of shadowy mist. He surrounded Twilight while in that form, and began to turn her own body into mist as well. Her body disappeared along with his, and he took her into the clouds. Strangely, she enjoyed how it felt to turn to mist. It was soothing to the touch, and almost like her body was made out of water. He led her on the way to his castle, where no pony would know what they were up to, and that was what they both needed at the moment. They eventually arrived at the steps of Sombra's castle. The mountain range was still in the middle of winter, but there was no snow to cover their tracks this time around. He let go of his grasp on her, allowing the alicorn to take her physical shape again. He reformed his body next to her, and they turned to his home. She gawked at the towering structure in front of her.
Well, what do you think?
He inquired.
It's, well,
Very you, she admitted.
you built all this yourself?
Yes, I did. You would be surprised what you can make with a creation spell, but we need to get you inside. It's cold out here.
And so he brought her inside the castle walls, where it was well lit and patrolled by shadow guards. Whenever they saw the princess, they stopped in their tracks and stared at the newest member to the castle. She felt strongly uncomfortable from all the eyes watching her every move.
They're watching you because you're the first visitor here.
He explained.
They'll warm up to you soon enough.
I hope so.
She stated.
Sombra, can I say something first?
He stopped in the middle of the hallway leading to the bedroom.
What is it?
Why did you take me in?
What do you mean? Has it not been made clear that I wanted to take you in to protect you from those who would harm you?
I understand, but why? I'm a murderer, and I'm weaker in my studies than I should be.
She was interrupted when she felt Sombra's lips press down on hers. He was kissing her at that moment, and held her tightly in his grasp. At first, she was prepared to pull away from his clutches, but the longer the kiss lasted, the more she grew to long for it. She kissed him back, allowing this to wash over her, and let her fears and doubts of him go at the same time. She was in love with Sombra, and she wanted to be. They shared that kiss for minutes, neither one wanting it to end. He patted through her mane with his hoof, and she kept her hooves tight around his waist. After some time, he finally pulled back from the kiss.
I don't care what you have done. I still love you, Twilight.
I think I love you too, Sombra,
She finally confessed.
Please, don't let me go.
I won't.
She responded by giving him another kiss on the lips.
But you must still be tired after all of that.
He mentioned.
It's midnight.
It is? Last time I checked, it was just after dusk.
I tell you, it's midnight. Come, I'll lead you to your chambers for tonight.
He led her through the rest of the hallway, where there was a lower amount of guards present. Eventually, it led to a door that was bigger than the rest. He opened it with his magic and led her inside. The room was enormous, 2 stories high at the very least. The room was draped in the color red, making it more pleasing than the pitch-black shades of the other rooms. Red carpet covered the ground, and it built up to the bed itself. It was a canopy bed, where the sheets hovering over it were pure white. The blanket was made out of silk, giving it an exotic feel, and the bed was big enough to sit at least 3 ponies.
This is where I normally sleep, if you haven't figured it out.
He stated.
But given all that's happened tonight, I'm giving it to you for now.
Wow, you did all of this for me?
She found herself crying again, confusing Sombra. He came by and nuzzled her neck.
What's the matter?
It's just that you've been so nice to me, and this means so much, that you're willing to do all of this to make me feel comfortable.
It's no problem. I'll see you in the morning.
He turned to go out of the room, leaving the room all to Twilight. Wait! She shouted.
What is it, Twilight?
Could you sleep with me in bed tonight?
He smiled.
I never thought you would ask.
Twilight climbed into bed first, and Sombra followed her in. She made sure she was placed right next to him as they went under the sheets. As soon as the blankets were pulled over them, she clung her body around his. Her hooves were all around his chest, and their bellies were practically touching.
Are you comfortable with this?
I'm fine. I just never figured you as the snuggling type.
I'm not, but I really need you with me right now. Does that make sense?
It does. And I promise that you'll never have to be scared of me. I want you to be able to trust me around yourself.
He kissed her on the lips for one last time that night. She didn't shy away, a sign that they were making great progress.
I do, but you're right. I need to get some sleep.
She dozed off to sleep, all while holding Sombra tightly in her grasp. He didn't try to push her off when she was asleep. Instead, he gave her a kiss on the top of her head. He smiled to himself, satisfied to have Twilight sleeping with him in bed that night. It was a sweet moment, and he would come to cherish it in his heart. Ah, yes. Everything was going according to plan. Dying Light. It was a pleasant surprise for Celestia to see how Twilight had handled her first big job. Truth be told, the Princess of the Sun wasn't sure how Twilight would perform in that meeting, not working as a teacher and student like before, but as equals. And Celestia discovered that her protege was more than willing to meet the challenge. She was calm, collected, very professional, and had some thoughtful ideas on how to tackle the issues in front of her. Obviously, Celestia made the right decision with her. However, there was one personal matter that wouldn't leave her head, and the way the meeting had started left her puzzled throughout the day, up to the moment where she was having dinner in the private dining hall. Her own dining hall wasn't that big. She didn't need all the room in such a place. It still had a good-sized table to boot, and it was yet another thing that carried her cutie mark as an emblem. The curtains over the windows were long and covered with white silk, and a chandelier lit the room in a gaudy yellow haze. She didn't dine alone that evening. The mayor of Ponyville went with her to eat in the hall, and they enjoyed a crisp salad together, made with the freshest plants from the gardens.
Are you sure that a 2-towered castle won't be too much for you?
Celestia asked her.
I know that it will house Twilight of all ponies, but it will be the largest structure your town has ever hosted. It's bound to be a landmark in no time.
I considered that into the design,
The mayor responded.
but you have to admit that everything changes with a princess living in town, especially in Alicorn of all ponies. Things were going to change no matter what.
But you still think it can be the same town as before, even with these plans?
Of course. Her castle won't be as big as yours, and you know that.
They continued on with their dinner, talking about this and that. It wasn't often that Celestia could just let herself go as she was with the mayor, and it always proved to be a nice change of pace whenever she could. After a while, they heard some pony running outside the dining hall, exasperated and groaning under her breath. Celestia would recognize that voice anywhere, even when it was running around everywhere.
What is Twilight doing here?
She asked a nearby guard, the one that was watching over the hall.
I don't know for certain, Your Majesty. She's complaining that she needs a quiet place.
He explained.
Maybe she just needs some time alone, like we're doing.
Mayor Mare offered.
Haven't you noticed that something's wrong with her, even now?
Questioned Celestia.
I have. She hasn't been herself since we left, but if she says it's personal, I'm not going any further.
I can't help but wonder what is going on, even with that. You might not know this, but she has always been open to me about everything. She came to me every time her brother was out in battle, asking if I knew if he was still alive. She even asked me if her doll was a living, breathing pony, and now she's shut herself away from me. That's why I don't understand why she's hiding this from me.
That's strange, but she has to be under some kind of stress. This is the biggest role she's ever had to do as a princess. Weren't you the same way when your parents gave you the title for the first time?
Even then, I was open about my feelings and the dilemmas to them. I didn't shut myself off from them, and said that we should talk later. And I don't know how she feels as if she needs to hide it from me.
She did say she would talk about it tomorrow. That's got to count for something.
You're right. Maybe I'm just worried about how she sees me now.
They went and finished their dinner late that night, and Luna went to raise the moon over Celestia's son. The mayor would find out where her bedroom for the night was, and Celestia would go off to her study foyer to handle some last-minute paperwork. The study foyer acted as her own little quiet place. It had its own fireplace and a cushioned seat to rest in. There were a few pictures on the shelves, ones full of memories throughout the last 50 years when camera came into existence. One picture stood out to her in particular. It was taken when Twilight had just reached teenagehood. She smiled nervously at the camera next to Celestia, while they stood at the top of the watchtower. The shot was angled so that all of Canterlot was visible behind them. Even then, she knew that this latest protege was something special. She came down to her seat, and took out the first of many letters she would have to look over. All from nobles. Some from members of the Griffin Kingdom, and even a few dragons only she was in touch with. Some things would never change. Before she could read the first letter, she heard a loud knock on the door.
Princess Celestia, open this door right now. It's an emergency.
The pony shouted. She opened it to find a royal guard captain waiting for her, panicked and ready to run.
What is it, General Silverstar?
We heard a commotion coming from the gardens. We think there might be an intruder.
Then I'm coming with you to find out.
She ran with Silverstar down the halls that led to the castle's gardens. She looked out the window to see if she could get a glimpse of what was going on outside. At that moment, she caught something in the corner of her eyes. She saw it only for a second, but it left a lasting impression. The figure was almost silhouetted under the moonlight, but she could see that the figure had wings spread out, trying to get out of there as fast as it could. But what stood out the most was that the pony had a horn as well, and judging from the outlines, she was purple in addition. Could it have been her flying for her life? It couldn't have been any pony else, given that the changelings and their queen Chrysalis had been imprisoned for months. This was no imposter. But as soon as Celestia saw the pony, she disappeared in mid-flight. They arrived at the entrance to the gardens. At least 3 units of guards were waiting there, each stallion approaching the door, very cautiously.
On the count of 3, you will open those doors and attack any invader that dares step foot into Celestia's castle. 1, 2, 3! They charged into the gardens with their voices raised high, but when they saw what happened around them, they stopped dead in their tracks. And when Celestia saw it for herself, a wave of shock hit her in the face. The gardens were ruined. The sole tree was smashed in the trunk, and had crashed into the side of the castle.
All the plants were uprooted and scattered, and 4 royal guards were lying all around the area. It looked as if some pony had ransacked the field, but nothing about it made sense at all. No pony was here they could put blame on. In fact, the response team and the princess were the only ponies present.
"Check the guards," Celestia commanded. "Make sure if they're alive or dead."
The guards did as they were told, and went over to examine the bodies. Meanwhile, Celestia stood and observed the devastation that was all around her. She couldn't step anywhere without encountering some kind of damage. One would normally hear birds chirping whenever they came into the gardens, but there was only silence. She assumed that they might have died in the blast, or whatever caused this to happen. She couldn't fathom what was the cause of all this. She wasn't the best detective in all of Equestria, but it was unusual that some pony made this kind of commotion, and then just left without doing anything else. Maybe they intended to attack her later, but discovered it was a lost cause when they realized that they just attacked 4 guards in the most unsubtle way possible. General Silverstar came back for a report. He held the helmet to one of the fallen in his right front hoof. His throat was stuffed up, and he had to work past the tears that tried to form.
All 4 guards are deceased, Your Majesty. We can assume from 2 of the bodies that magic was used to kill them. That's all we know.
"Send a letter to Shining Armor at once," Celestia instructed. "Tell him everything you know. I think he'll want to be here for the investigations."
Silverstar nodded, and he went on his way to send the letter. Celestia went down to see 2 of the slain guards, the ones that were electrocuted to death. Some of the stallions were still examining their bodies, trying to find any clue they could catch. One of their necks was wet, but they only assumed it was from the water around there. She couldn't help but mourn silently for their loss. Even though every royal guard knew that their lives could end in that manner, it didn't soften the blow whenever there was a guard down. She knew she would have to send letters to 4 families in the morning, and she was prepared to do anything to help them get through this difficult time in their lives. But something caught her attention in the corner of the gardens. It stood out to her, almost calling to tell her what it was. She walked over to get a better image of it. The moment she realized what it was, she let out a rare gasp from her lips. She didn't want to believe it was what she suspected. She hovered the item over to her face, and realized it was a purple feather, and not just any old purple feather, but the same shade of purple that Twilight would have on her wings. She kept gazing at it, trying to convince herself that it was perhaps just left by a pony with the same coat color, but she knew she was lying to herself. Maybe she just didn't want to believe that her beloved student could do such a thing. But it only got worse for her case. A guard arrived at the scene, levitating pieces of clothing with his magic.
Princess Celestia, we found these all around the gardens.
They were the same golden sandals that Twilight would wear. He even carried the same crown that Twilight received when she was promoted. Celestia couldn't bear to see that set of jewelry. All it did was confirm that Twilight was the one responsible. She immediately realized that it was her student that was the one flying for her life. It just couldn't be true.
"Take those away from me," she demanded. "Put them away with the rest of the evidence."
Yes, Your Majesty.
He took them away from her sight. She didn't know what to believe when it came to what she was witnessing. There was so much evidence pointing to a theory that this was all Twilight's doing. There weren't that many alicorns flying around there, and the items she found only fueled the idea that she really did murder those poor guards. But there had to be more to this than meets the eye. She couldn't figure out why Twilight would do that, and then the idea got into her head that it might have had something to do with the matter that was troubling her student. It made sense at that point. Twilight was so open to her about anything and every pony, but she would close herself off from Celestia whenever that topic was brought up. Celestia decided that she had found out what the topic really was. It was the only lead that she could come up with.
"Fillies and gentle colts, this was indeed the work of Princess Twilight Sparkle," she stated to the guards, "but I do not think it was entirely her doing either. I want search parties looking all around Equestria for her, day and night. If you find her location, do not try to capture her, but explain that we want to know what happened tonight. Any attempts to attack her first, or to present themselves as a threat, will be handled with swift punishment. We will begin searching for Princess Twilight tomorrow."
The guards saluted her, and continued searching the gardens for anything else they could find. Celestia sighed quietly to herself. She was not looking forward to discovering what state she would find her beloved student in. It would be best to find out that she didn't really do it at all, but was merely framed for it. Or at least, that's what Celestia was secretly wishing for. Shining Armor would be there tomorrow morning. That much she knew. He would drop everything the minute he realized that the murders involved his close sister. before the end of the next day, she would have to send a letter to Spike as well. She wanted him to sleep in peace before his world came crashing down around his eyes. Deeper into the shadows. The following night was one of the best nights of sleep Sombra had had in years. It was a deep and relieving sleep, and it left him well rested for the day. He didn't have that luxury for centuries, as he was in a position that forced him to stay on his hooves every single moment of his life. But here, he could be at ease with himself as he pleased. After all, Twilight was finally here with him, and he was looking forward to doing lots of things with her. But when he opened his eyes and saw what was going on, he noticed that Twilight was with him in bed, burying her face in his chest. He discovered that his chest fur was wet from all of her tears, and she muttered something while her snout was deep in his fur.
Twilight, what's the matter?
He asked her. She didn't react immediately, and she allowed the tears to keep pouring out of her. Her body was shaking from the agony of her situation, and she was a mere shell of her confident, self-assured self.
There. I'm here for you,
he said, wrapping his hooves around her backside.
Let it all out.
I'm never going to see my friends again, am I?
She cried out.
Not like this. Applejack, Fluttershy, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash. I already miss them all. And how are they going to accept me when...
He comforted her with a tight hug, soothing her spirits back to normal. He allowed her to keep her head on his chest for some time. She didn't say anything for a while.
I'll be here for you, even when your friends and family abandon you,
he whispered in her ear.
You know I'm not going to let anything in your past get in the way, and you can stay here inside the castle as long as you like. Does that help?
She slowly nodded, unable to get any words out. Every time she tried to speak, her voice stuffed up and she could never get past the tears. But it didn't matter, when action spoke louder than words. They spent a few minutes in the early morning like that, wrapped up in another's grasp. He would take a moment every now and then to nuzzle her mane around her horn, and she giggled from the move. His snout was ticklish around her horn, yet it turned out to be exactly what she wanted. Some pony to comfort her at that moment.
What's going to happen to me now? She breathed.
I forgot. This must all be new to you. Have you ever had to be in exile before?
Once, but that was different. I was in exile because I lost a magic duel with another unicorn named Trixie, and I wasn't on the run because no pony had any reason to chase me. I found a way to come back to Ponyville, but that was before I was a princess.
So you've never been in a situation like this either. But I think I might have a few things we could do later today. But you must realize that it must all be done inside the castle grounds. We can't risk Celestia or any of her guards knowing that you're here.
I understand. I thought that was going to happen anyway.
Now then, you lost control of dark magic because you had no control over it, right?
Right.
Her voice was low-pitched, forced to remember the outcome of last night.
The problem was, you don't know how to control it. It took over your body for a few minutes, but I know how to master it. And if you are willing, I can show you everything I know about dark magic so it never happens again. Would you like that?
Twilight sat up in her bed next to Sombra. Her hooves toyed with the blankets while she was deep in thought.
Am I sure that I want this? There's no going back if I say yes. I'll be deep into dark magic, and he'll be my new teacher. Then again, what else is there to do if I say no? Wait for Celestia to find me? I want to learn about dark magic. Could you teach me everything you know?
He smiled and lifted up in his place to hold her again. He kissed her while he held her tightly, and she kissed him back in relief.
Of course I will, but we should probably get ready for the day first.
They shared a quiet breakfast together, enjoying the surprisingly good omelets and homemade coffee from Ponyville. She didn't know how he came up with the food on her plate, just applying it to the fact that he had a creation spell that knew very few limits. After all, it created the very castle she resided in. The room that served as Sombra's own dining hall was just as extravagant and lavish as any place Twilight had ever seen. The typical black stone walls gave way to walls that were entirely constructed out of dark crystal. It shimmered the reflections of the two ponies inside, and the room itself was expansive for a whole half-mile. Paintings of various historical moments before Celestia's rule hung on the walls, featuring the likes of Commander Hurricane and Princess Platinum. However, even in a place as beautiful as this, Twilight didn't say much of anything during the meal. She wouldn't get over all that she'd been through in one day, and that was what happened there. After it was over, he moved out of his seat and came to Twilight's side of the table.
If you are finished with your meal, we're ready to start today's lessons.
Yeah, I'm done anyway. So where are we going for this?
It's a place that would act as a training ground for any other castle. You never know when you will need it in the future.
So they left the dining room together, and Sombra led her through the way to the training grounds. She went through countless hallways and twists on the way there. It took longer than she anticipated, and at times she felt like a mouse in a maze. Meanwhile, she noticed that the shadow guards were acting much differently this time around. They kept their stoic look on their faces, even when the strange and unusual guest passed right by them.
See, I told you they would adjust to having a new pony around here in no time.
Sombra commented.
Now then, here we are.
She was brought to another expansive room of the castle, but it was much different in tone. The walls were almost entirely gray in this place, and it felt very industrial to her in design. What stood out the most was the presence of a target range, not unlike the one she built in Ponyville herself. There were 24 haystacks, but the targets were cardboard cutouts of generic pony designs, all white and all unicorns. A few shadow guards stood by the range, waiting nearby with replacement targets in their possession. Sombra came forward to the middle of the room, and lowered himself down to the battle position.
This is what it will look like when you master this spell in particular. Watch closely at how many I can take down.
His horn beamed with his own magic, pure black in its aura. The magic emitting from it was so strong, it caused the ground underneath Twilight's hooves to quiver. The magic aura grew in size, until it was 1/3 Sombra's size around his horn. He took a deep breath and pointed his horn at the targets. When he released the spell, it shot out countless electrical bolts, black in coloring, at the cardboard ponies. Within a few seconds, all 24 ponies were demolished in their place. Pieces of cardboard littered the floor, some even landing right before the couple. Twilight jumped back in surprise, certain that one piece would smack her in the face if she stayed in one place for too long. He exhaled and wiped his brow clean when it was over.
And that is the full potential of this craft.
Without having to be told, the shadow guards went to work on replacing the targets. Some swept up all the cardboard with their horns, while others placed new targets to work with into the haystacks. In no time at all, there were 24 targets again, and the range was clean of any debris.
Now let's see what you can do on your own, Twilight. You might have taken out that tree in the park, but this is dealing with numbers now. You will find yourself in situations where you must deal with a number as large as this, or face certain death.
A shiver went down her spine when she was put on the spot. There was no way she was going to top what he just did. Then again, it was her first day under Sombra's wing. She stepped up to the plate, ready to show what she was made of. Sombra took a few steps back, since this was a highly unpredictable field they were working with.
Remember, it's just your first day, she thought. You don't need to get every one of them right now.
Her horn beamed bright with the same dark magic he used. She concentrated on all 24 targets at once, lined up in a row for her to get. She would have to use the same spell he used to get them. All of her efforts went into preparing it, and the aura grew in size with the concentration. She had done 12 targets before, even if it was by accident, and she could do it again. While she thought about it, a number of thoughts tried to invade her mind, scaring Spike when she lost control the first time she let herself go, killing 4 ponies the second time. It proved to be too much. She could barely concentrate on anything but her failures. Drops of sweat traveled down her face, and the magic aura was failing to grow to the heights Sombra had reached. When she finally did release the spell, it was the weakest one in dark magic she had ever done. Only a few lightning strikes went out to the targets, and they barely hit any of them at all. After the smoke cleared and Twilight saw the fruit of her work, only 3 targets were destroyed. The others didn't even have a scratch on them. And yet the spell took a lot out of her. Her forehead was drenched in sweat, and her limbs were shaking from the energy that was lost in the process. She turned to see Sombra and hoped for his approval, even though she knew she didn't deserve it with that performance.
Is something getting in the way when you prepare the spell?
He inquired.
While all magical fields do have a mental element to them, dark magic is especially so. And given what's happened to you in the last 24 hours, I would not be surprised.
She nodded in shame.
I keep thinking about everything I've done with dark magic up till now. I'm not sure what to do about it.
In that case, it's a simple answer. Do you recall in Star Swirl the Bearded's book that dark magic carries a mind of its own?
I remember. Does that have something to do with my setbacks?
Correct. Dark magic carries a mind of its own, one that cannot be tamed. Do you want to know the secret to mastering that aspect?
More than anything. I don't want to end up killing more innocent ponies, all because I couldn't get a grip on it.
Then I will tell you. The secret is rather simple, and you'll learn it in no time. The secret to mastering dark magic is to not fight its influence. Allow it to flow through you. Control your magic entirely.
But that's how I lost it! It took over my horn and did things on its own.
That's because you were most likely fighting it. Isn't that what you tried to do?
Maybe.
Then that's the problem. See what happens when you don't fight it, but go with its power.
He took a few more steps back, widening the distance between them. Twilight turned to face the same targets. The Shadow Guards had already replaced the 3 destroyed cutouts, so she could go whenever she wanted. She was going to do it for real this time. She posed again in a battle position, and got her horn to emit dark magic as before, while all the air flew around her like a hurricane. Sombra observed that Twilight seemed to be more concentrated, and decided to emit a spell of his own. The spell was invisible to the naked eye, and it went inside her ears to enter her brain. He was pleased to see inside her head nothing but concentration to the spell she was working on. Every other thought was cast aside before it could distract her.
So you are willing after all. It's time to get you to see what I see.
Then he cast another spell at Twilight. It landed on her horn and caused the aura to grow to a third of her size like it did for him. To her, it seemed like dark magic was finally working in her favor. She almost let out tears of joy to see that she was making it work like she wanted.
Release the spell,
he commanded. She did as she was told and let go, and it felt like a tidal wave escaped from her body. She heard the breaking of cardboard in front of her, and the purple trails coming out of her eyes were stronger than ever before. Much to her surprise, she didn't feel spent when it was over, and she knew that the second attempt far exceeded the first in power. She took a look at the results, and was stunned out of her mind. Very much like Sombra's demonstration, she had managed to destroy every single target in her wake. Debris was sent everywhere, and not one of the pony cutouts survived her attack. She held a hoof in her mouth, astonished by the results of the new technique. She couldn't believe that something like this came from her. Behind her, she heard Sombra stomp on the floor in applause.
Impressive. Very impressive.
He spoke.
You learn faster than any pony I've seen. Now let's see you try it again, to make sure you've mastered this for good.
After a few minutes of setup, the range was restocked and it was Twilight's turn to go.
All right, but I'm sure I can do this again, she said.
I know you can, but practice never hurt any pony.
That's right! That way I can stay loose with this.
Twilight went and focused everything she had into a third electrical attack, allowing the aura on her horn to gain in size. She wanted to prove to Sombra that the first success wasn't a fluke, and there would be nothing better than to see her caretaker happy with her work. All the while, Sombra focused his own magic on going in as deep as he could with her brain. A seed inserted here, a thought implanted there. That's all he needed to do at this point. He could detect from within that she was willing to work with him at this point. And so he got out in time, only to witness another 24 targets destroyed by Twilight's spell. All the pieces were exactly where they needed to be for him. After it was over, he walked over to her side. She was finally exhausted from all the work, and instinctively leaned on his shoulder. She kept breathing in and out, in and out. He felt her body drenched in sweat from the practicing.
That's enough for now. You are one of the fastest learners I've ever seen,
he complimented.
That was amazing! Like I had to do nothing at all to be good at it this time.
That's one way to put it. But there's still much to learn. Dark magic carries more than one spell, but I believe you've already mastered one of them.
Really? You think so?
You hit as many targets in one round as I do, and dark magic is almost everything I know. That says a lot about your skills.
She leaned even heavier on his shoulder as she managed to catch up with her breath. Sweat still managed to pour down her face, though.
Twilight, can I ask you something?
Okay, I'm listening.
Are you sure this is what you want for yourself? You're living in the middle of exile now, away from every pony you know and love.
What choice do I have? They'll never bring me back into their fold again, not after all I've done.
I know that, but let's just say you never killed any pony, And you're allowed to roam Equestria as much as you would like. Free will and all that. Would you still want to be here with me?
She stopped in the middle of the conversation and gave herself some time to think it over. Turned out, she didn't need much time at all.
I still would. You've demonstrated that you're willing to change. I just wish I didn't have to pick one over the other. It's a horrible feeling to go through. But I like being with you. I really do.
That's what I needed to know.
He would have kept spending time with Twilight, but then the scent of perspiration overwhelmed his nostrils.
I'm sorry if I offended you, but after all that, you need to take a shower.
She brought a hoof to her nose and smelled herself.
Wow, I didn't realize how hard I was working. But you actually have a shower I can use?
Sure. I might not have caught up with the times as you have, but I know what a shower is.
Hot water pressed Twilight's mane down to her face. Steam rose up from her body, and all the sweat accumulated from the range washed away from the stream. Minutes melted away as the boiling water soothed away the tension in her muscles. She didn't know how long she wanted to be there for, but it didn't matter. This bathroom was all hers for the taking. She recognized this as the first solitary moment she had since she arrived in Sombra's castle, the first moment she could spend alone with her thoughts. And yet she found herself wishing Sombra was there, encouraging her with his wisdom, holding her tightly and saying he was never going to let her go. But even then she knew that wasn't normal for her. She always enjoyed these moments in the past where she could just think quietly to herself without some pony chiming in. So why was she acting like this now? She brought out the soap and scrubbed it all over her belly and backside. It took away the dirt from the gardens she still carried on her coat, even taking care of the trace amounts of blood left by a certain guard. The soap got rid of it all, and she was grateful for that. It was almost like washing away a memory. After she was finished with the shampoo and washed her mane clean as well, she climbed out of the tub and shook the water off like a dog. She levitated a towel over to her side and took care of any leftover water. The cloud of steam eventually escaped the bathroom, and she noticed that there was a mirror in there. She wanted to make sure she was presentable for Sombra before she went out again, so she went over to look at it. When she looked at her reflection, she saw a purple alicorn staring back at her with the strangest eyes. Where the whites would be, greens took their place. It wasn't an effect of magic. She wasn't using her horn at all and knew it. The greens were permanent parts of her eyes now. She blinked a few times just to make sure she was really seeing this, and when she realized that it wasn't her imagination, she jumped back in surprise.
Are those really my eyes?
She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her face pressed closer to the other pony's reflection, and realized it was for real.
Why is this happening to me? How is it even possible that I have green eyes? Wait, Sombra has green eyes and purple mist coming out of them, and he uses dark magic all the time.
She paused for a moment, and realized the reason behind this change. It only served to weird her out.
Does this mean I'll have purple mist coming out of my eyes if I keep doing this? I need to keep an eye on this, make sure this is all it does to me. If it gets any worse, Sombra will know what to do. I hope he's not freaked out when he sees me like this.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that section. It's really getting good. Really getting good. Really can't wait. I'm sorry if I'm sorry if this section wasn't really on par with everything else, 'cause I kind of recorded this with a cold, and so my throat is dry and my nose is slightly stuffy. I mean, it's not bad or anything, but if it ends up hindering the process at all, you know, that's why. So, but anyhow, okay, just a few short announcements. First of all, my 300 sub Q&A. I really messed up on that. With the cutoff time. It's the 31st, not the 24th. The audio says the 24th, but the annotations and the description says the 31st, and I messed up even more by saying it was Tuesday the 31st when the 31st is a Monday. So, but yeah, I messed that up. So, I'm going to extend it. I'm going to extend the cutoff time to Friday, April 4th. Friday, April 4th. So you have then until then to post a question. And please, please post a question. I really want you guys to post questions so that I can answer them, because it's a sub special, and yeah. So please post a question. I'll leave a link. I'll leave a link to the video in the description. But anyhow, so yeah, please go to the video that I leave a link for and post a question. Another thing. Another thing. A friend of mine, one of my best buddies, Epic Dash. He's been subscribed to me since the very beginning. He's been there since the very beginning. Great support, both online and in person. He's my bro. He's my bro. But anyhow, he started up a Fanfic reading channel, and he has his first 2 readings out already. So I'll leave a link to his channel in the description too. It's actually his. I haven't listened to the second one yet, but the first one, it's actually a lot better than I anticipated. He's actually all right. Actually pretty solid. His readings kind of have like an Aska feel to it. He reads blind. He reads blind and reacts along with the story, and so kind of an Aska feel to his readings, and it's pretty funny. It's good. He's a good reader. He's a good reader. He's starting out. He's just starting out. But yeah, I'm promoting his channel, so because he's my buddy and he's been supporting me since the very beginning of this channel, and we're actually gonna do a collab in the future. So, but anyhow, so go check out his channel. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. And that is that. But anyhow, so yeah, go check out Epic Dash's channel, which I'll leave. I think that's all I really wanted to say at the moment. So with that, you guys, I'll catch you all later. Really hope you guys enjoyed this. So anyhow,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
I swear I will see to it Her Majesty repossesses your... Bleh. Bleh. I swear I will see to it Her Majesty
I swear I will see to it Her Majesty repossesses your secret stash of romance novels. I swear I will see to it her... Oh, fuck. Okay. She then realized why she was fighting with herself all over this. Oh, wait. She then realized why she was fighting herself all... Bleh. She then realized why she was fighting with herself over all of this. She then realized why he... She then realized why she was fighting herself all... Oh my gosh. Seriously. Then she realized why she was fighting herself all over... Then she realized why she was fighting herself all... Over all of this, not all over. Fuck you, me. But that only made his triumphs sweeter. Wow. But that only made his triumphs sweeter. Okay, I'm gonna take off the S in triumphs and make triumph. Lay out the future of Ponyville with her former teacher and fellow Ponyvillian official. Ponyvillian?
This is the Royal Guard of Celestia's army. It is time for the meeting with Princess...
Oh my gosh.
It is time for the meeting with Princess Twilight at Sparkle.
Oh my gosh.
It is time for the meeting with Princesses Twilight, Sparkle, and Celestia and Cat.
Oh my gosh. How does Christian Bale do this? How does Christian Bale do this? It is so breathy. It is so breathy. How does he do this? Damn it, Christian Bale. It was juxtapositioned with Luna's moon. It was juxtaposition. Oh, juxtaposed. Juxtaposed. Okay. That's much better. Okay. A strong sensation of Disneyus. A strong sensation of Disneyus came over her. Because Disney is trying to take over the world. Including Hasbro. It's trying to take over Hasbro and take over MLP. And it's trying to take over the world. Disney must not take over the world. Oh boy. She didn't die alone. And he was looking forward to doing lots of things with her. If you know what I mean.
Now then, you lost control of dark magic because you had no control over it, right?
Really? Really? You have to be that redundant?
Sure. I'm sure.
It's weird. It's weird when Sombra says sure.